Okay, welcome to lecture 5. Today we're going to be doing the distributive property. Now, when you do the distributive property, what you're doing is you're taking something that's on the outside and you're distributing it to everything on the inside. So what does that look like? Well, I'm going to go over here and choose red, and I'm going to put an A on the outside. And then on the inside of the parentheses, I'm going to put a B plus C. So I'm going to have B, let's make it blue. And then I'm going to have a plus in the middle. And then I'm going to have a green C. And then I'll close it up. Okay, so this is the distributive property. So what we're going to do is we're going to take whatever's on the outside and we're going to distribute this. We're going to distribute this. So how does that work? Well, we're going to take this A and we're going to multiply it by B first. And when we multiply A by B, we're going to get AB. A, B. And then I'm going to have my plus in the middle. Whatever sign is in the middle, you're going to keep it that way. So I'm going to put down a plus. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the A and I'm going to multiply it by the C to get AC. AC. And that's it. So all you're doing is you're taking what's on the outside of the parentheses and you're multiplying it by whatever on the inside. Okay? Let's do a couple problems like that. Let's look at the problem set. The problem sets. We'll be doing number 1 first. Okay. I have 7, and in parentheses right next to it, I'm going to have 10 plus 5n. So what I want to do with this is I want to take whatever's on the outside, and I'm going to multiply it by whatever's on the inside of the parentheses. And I go from left to right. So I'm going to multiply 7 by 10. If I multiply 7 by 10, I'm going to get 70, right? So I multiply the 7 by the 10, I get 70. And then since there's a plus sign in the middle right here, I'm going to put a plus sign right here. Always keep that same sign. And now I'm going to take the 7 and I'm going to multiply it by the 5n. So if I take 7 and I multiply it by the 5, I'm going to get 35. But there's an n attached to it, right? This is the variable. So I need to leave that n next to the 35. And I'm done. And that's the distributive property in a nutshell. All you're trying to do is you're trying to multiply everything on the inside by whatever's on the outside. Okay? Let's try number 2. Number 2 says 10 on the outside, and then what's on the inside? 8m minus 6. 8m minus 6. M is just going to be the variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 10 right here and I'm going to multiply it by the 8m first. When I do that, I get 80m. And then I'm going to multiply the 10 by this 6 over here. And I'm going to get 60. I get 60. And then whatever sign is in the middle, here it happens to be a minus sign, I'm going to leave that in the middle. So whatever sign is in the middle, you're going to keep that the same. Whether it's a plus sign or if it's a minus sign, you're going to keep that sign the same. Okay? So you're taking whatever's on the outside and you're multiplying it by everything that's on the inside of the parentheses while keeping the sign in the middle the same. Okay. Now let's look at number 3. Okay. So what does number 3 say? It says -2 times v plus 2. V plus 2. So what's happening here? Notice that on the outside, I have a -2. So I'm going to take that -2 and I'm going to multiply it by everything that's on the inside, the v and the +2. So if I multiply -2 times v, I'm just going to get -2v. Since the v is a variable, all I do is I put the variable next to the number. And that just means we're multiplying -2 times v. There is a plus sign in the middle, right? But what happens when I multiply the -2 times the +2? -2 times +2, that's going to give me a -4. So I could write my answer like that, or I could write my answer like this. Keep the plus the same, and then you have a -4. And these two are going to be the same answers. Notice that they're the same answer because subtracting is the same thing as multiplying by a negative, or what I really wanted to say was subtracting is the same thing as adding a negative, right? So these two answers are actually the same thing. They're just written differently. Now, it's much cleaner to do it this way that I did on the top than it is to do on the bottom, but both of them are still technically correct. All right, let's try number 4. Number 4, I have a negative sign on the outside, and on the inside, I have a 4v plus 9. I have a 4v plus 9. So what's going on here? Well, first of all, notice that I have a negative on the outside, but there's no number. It's just a negative sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 1, a -1 on the outside. Because if there is no number, we just assume there to be a 1, right? So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everything on the inside by a -1, and I'll just see what happens. Now, when you multiply by a -1, all you're doing is you're keeping it the same, but you're changing it to a negative. So what's -1 times 4v? That's going to be -4v, right? And then -1 times a +9 is going to give you a -9. So I can write my answer this way, or I could write my answer this way. -4v plus -9. Both of these are the same exact answers. All right, let's try number 5. For number 5, I've got a -4 times 3n minus 3. Okay, so what am I multiplying by on the outside? Well, I'm multiplying everything by a -4, right? So we're going to multiply everything on the inside by what's on the outside, a -4. So -4 times 3n, that's going to give me -12n. That's the first part of my answer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the -4 by the -3. Notice that this is a -3. That's important. What's negative 4 times negative 3? Negative 4 times negative 3, that's actually going to give you a positive 12. And that's my answer. Negative 12n plus 12. Okay? Now, for that example, notice that the negative 4 is being multiplied by a negative 3, right? If I did it another way, I would still get negative 12n. And if I keep this negative sign the same, I would keep a negative sign right here, but then I wouldn't have a negative sign anymore, right? I would have a negative 4 times a positive 3, which is a negative 12. But as you know, we have a double negative right here. And that double negative turns into a positive. So I get the same answer back again, no matter which way I do it. Okay? And that's just because the double negative is going to give me a positive. Okay. So on the next slide, we're going to do 6 through 10. And we're going to be doing the distributive property like we've been doing for the first 5 questions. But we're also going to be combining like terms at the end. And you'll see how we do that when we do number 6. Okay? All right, so let's try number 6. Number 6 says 9x plus 10 times 6x plus 6. 6x plus 6. And then I'm going to close it up. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the distributive property. Notice that I have a 10 on the outside. Notice that I have a 10 on the outside. That's important because that's going to tell me to do the distributive property. So I'm going to take that 10 and I'm going to multiply it by everything that's on the inside. Right? So let's do that. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to bring down the 9x. It's just kind of hanging out by itself, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it down to my final answer. And I'm going to put a plus in the middle. Okay. So now let's do the distributive property. I've got 10 times 6x. That's going to give me 60x. 60x. And then I have a plus sign in the middle right here, so I need to bring that down. So I bring down a plus. And now I have to multiply 10 by 6. And that's pretty easy, right? You just get 60. So here I did the distributive property. I did the distributive property. I multiplied everything on the inside by 10. That's all that I did. Okay, so now do you see what like terms we have? I want you to notice that the 9x and the 60x both end in the same variable, right? They both end with an x. That means that they're like terms, right? And if they're like terms, we can add them or subtract them. So what's 9x plus 60x? That's going to give you 69x. So I just combine like terms. There's a plus right here and a 60 right here. So I'm going to bring that down to my final answer. And I'm done. So in this step, I combine like terms. And then I'm done. Combine like terms. So the first step of this problem was to do the distributive property. That's always going to be my first step. And then after that, I noticed that the 9x and the 60x both end with the same variable, right? So I'm justified and combining those, and I get 69x plus 60. Okay. Now, I'm going to skip 7, and I'm going to go down to 9. I'm going to do 9 next. Okay. So number 9 says we got negative 9 times 8n plus 1. 8n plus 1 inside parentheses. And then I have a plus 6 on the outside. I have a plus 6 on the outside, right? So let's take a look at this. What would I do first to get this answer rolling? Well, the first thing I would do is I would do the distributive property, just like I did for number 6. I'm going to take whatever's on the outside. In this case, it's a negative 9. I'm going to multiply it by everything that's on the inside. So I'm going to multiply it by 8n, and I'm going to multiply it by this positive 1 over here. And then at the very end of the question, I'm going to add 6. But we're going to save that for later. Okay? So we need to do this term first. And then we'll move on to the plus 6. Okay? All right, so I need to multiply negative 9 by 8n. When I do that, I get negative 72n, right? That's pretty easy. I'm just multiplying the negative 9 by the 8, and then I attach the variable n at the very end. The next thing I have to do is I have to multiply the negative 9 by the positive 1. And when I do that, I get negative 9. Since anything times 1 is just going to be what you started off with. So now I have negative 72n minus 9, and then I need to bring down the plus 6. The plus 6 is just kind of hanging out here at the end, but we're going to combine those at the end, right? So to get to this step, all I did was I distributed. I used the distributive property, right? Distributive property. So now what I can do is underline my like terms. I notice that negative 9 is just a regular number, just like the 6 is. So I'm going to underline those. And now I'm going to combine them together. I bring down my negative 72n. There's no other term that ends with a variable, so this isn't going to combine with anything. But the regular numbers are going to combine. What's negative 9 plus 6? Negative 9 plus 6, that's going to be negative 3. And I'm done. So for this step, what did we do? We combine like terms. And we combine like terms until there's no like terms left. Okay? So that is number 9. So for these last 5 on your classwork, what we're doing is we're doing it in a 2-step process. The first step is using the distributive property. And then the second step is we combine like terms wherever possible. Okay. Let me do number 10, and that'll be the last one that I do. Okay, number 10. Number 10 has a 2 on the outside, and on the inside, we have a 3x minus 2. 3x minus 2. And then I have a minus 5x, which is actually a negative 5x, right? Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the distributive property on this thing right here. Notice there's a 2 on the outside. So I'm going to multiply everything that's on the inside of the parentheses by the 2. I'm going to multiply 2 by 3x, and then I'm going to multiply 2 by this minus 2 over here. So what happens when I do that? What's 2 times 3x? Wouldn't that just be 6x, right? So I get 6x, and I bring down my minus sign. 2 times 2 is going to give me 4. So 6x minus 4. Good. So that's the distributive property. And then, of course, I need to bring down this, the negative 5x. So I'm going to put that right next to the negative 4. So I just need to bring that down to my final step. So we use the distributive property here. What's the next step I have to do after the distributive property? I need to combine like terms, right? Combine like terms. Okay. So which terms are going to match up with each other? And which one is just going to be out on its lonesome without anything to combine with? Well, let me switch my colors to red. Notice that we have a 6x and a negative 5x. They both end in the same variable, right? That means that they are like terms. I can combine them, right? But the negative 4 in the middle, it's not going to combine with anything since there's no other regular number to combine with. So I'm just going to bring that down to the final answer. But we'll do that a little bit later. Okay, so let's combine like terms. I have 6x minus 5x. That's going to give me a 1x, or just an x. And then the negative 4, I'm just going to bring that down, and I'm done. My answer is 1x minus 4. But notice, since there's a 1 out in front, I can also write it as x minus 4. So both of these are actually going to be the same answer. Because if you just have a variable with no number out in front, no coefficient, then it's assumed that there should be a 1 out in front, right? Okay, so that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. Distributive property for the first 5 questions, and then the 2-step problems are the last 5, where you have to actually do the distributive property and combine like terms. Okay? And that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's talk about what's going to be due on Sunday. You have 2 assignments. You have the combine like terms classwork, which you should have already done on Monday. But today, you're going to do the distributive property classwork. Distributive property classwork. You can do that today. But nevertheless, both of these assignments are going to be due on Sunday. Okay? All right. That's going to be it for me. If you have any questions on your classwork, or if you have any questions about the lecture today, you can put those in the chat box. I will answer those in a few minutes. And if you're still having trouble on some of the classwork problems, you can see me during my office hours today at 2:15. Okay, so that's always going to be an option. That's it. Class dismissed. I will see you next week on Monday.